What is a diasporan experience like?
It was a shock.
Identity is at the core of us. We cannot talk about parenting without understanding the backdrop that underpin that parenting.
We're getting more educated and losing our own essence.
If we cannot be proud of who we are, that leads to some form of dislocation with our own selves.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening to our podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about everything parenting from a migrant's perspective. As a mother, parenting in a diaspora, where the village you come from is far away and the one where you are in doesn't quite understand. We discuss issues around culture, identity, and everything in between. Today, we'll be talking to somebody from the homeland who truly understands what it means to parent. A lot of the issues around motherhood and parenting will be exploring cultures, between cultures, across cultures, but importantly, we'll be drawing on the real life experiences of our people from the southern background, people from the global south, navigating parenting from a global perspective. Today, I'm privileged to have with me my guest, Rahma. She's a doula, but I think rather than me introducing her, I'll have her introduce herself. Rahma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Rahma Yelwa. I'm a mother, I'm a doula, an educator, a cultural practitioner, and many other things in between.
Exactly. Because as African women, we do a lot of things. It's never the one thing or the other. But I think also importantly, what really interested me, wanted to talk to you today, is about all the different facets that you explore, but how you bring it all together. So maybe if you wanted to just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into what you do, doula, and how it all comes together.
Okay, my background. Oh God, how back do I go? Background, I studied law in the university. And then somehow I found myself in the classroom and I was teaching for almost a decade. In the classroom, I got married, I had my first daughter, and so I did get to interact with students, with parents, with the system and all of that within the classroom. And after being a mother, I then discovered language for being a doula. And then, I got my training and all of that. And then there were many other things in between that. But essentially, that's how I arrived at where I am right now, from being a classroom teacher and then becoming a doula, also becoming a stay-at-home parent at some point when my daughter was younger. Get oh, I need to be at home more and all of those things. So yeah, they're all of those are the kind of big milestones. So yes, that have kind of part of my journey.
Very, very interested. What really interests me about you is that you educated as a lawyer, and oftentimes that's very Western, isn't it? Educated, and oftentimes you find in our culture, and I just want to say that we're recording today from Nigeria. So really excited about that. This idea that there is an aspiration, isn't there, where we have language that is handed down to us about underdeveloped and developed. And oftentimes we're aspiring to be developed. And developed oftentimes isn't what we do. Developed is what is handed down to us from the global north. So what really interests me is how you got from being trained as a lawyer, getting into the classroom as a teacher, and then being involved in what you now do as a doula. What was that journey like? And what were some of the things that informed that decision making? And perhaps for our audience, if you say what a doula is, because not everyone will understand what that means.
So it's so interesting because it was, lawyer is so respectable and all of that. And I used to say when I was in the classroom, I had a mild irritation. I'm like, oh, I love this job so much, but it's annoying because people just think, oh, you're a teacher, you lack ambition, all of those things. It's oh, you're just settling in life. And it's so hard to kind of not reconcile, but it's I actually like teaching. I'm actually kind of a good one as well. But it was almost
And it's such an important job as well, which is sometimes surprising because you're right. Here in Nigeria, you kind of have to be the professions. This is a lawyer.
oh, she's not a teacher. What do you? you're trusting me with the minds of your children, and somehow it's looked down upon in this way. So there was that. But there was also the interacting with the children and interacting with the parent. And somehow from a parent, you're kind of like, it's almost sad sometimes, when you have a student and then maybe they're struggling or they're not, but then you meet their parents and you're like, no wonder, right? And they're like, oh, it's so and so's mom. And you're like, I see. And then you're kind of like able to picture how,
that really central role of parenting in the outputs you get, in the life of a child.
And then it's like, oh, no wonder. And then, I had that, and then I had my children as well. I had my first child, and then, there was the pressure of working and me trying to parent as well, and then taking a step back from the classroom and kind of just being home with my child. And then even in that time, I was tutoring a little bit, kind of giving having activities with children, also kind of homeschooling my daughter, because now I say homeschooling, I don't think that a 2-year-old going to school is necessary, right? So we're not homeschooling, we're just existing. And in existing, she's socializing and she's learning the things that she needs to become, right? And so there's that. And then there's the also process of me like becoming a mother and mothering, and the support I got and how it impacted me and all of those things, and how I showed up for friends when they had babies. I remember then,
I'm going to stop you right there, because that's one of the things that, especially when I first moved outside of Nigeria, that caught me. This whole thing about motherhood. Motherhood is an experience. When you give birth, it is an experience. It isn't an event. Whereas my experience when I first went to visit somebody who'd had a child in the UK was they had the baby yesterday, they're in the kitchen the next day, and they're looking after the baby all by themselves. So maybe, not to cut you short, maybe to sort of segue into that. What is your experience of as a mother in Nigeria, in Africa, of pregnancy, childbirth, and the support that is available?
So it's very interesting, yeah, and that's why, even speaking about showing up for friends and everything. When I had my baby, for example, my mother-in-law came over, my auntie came over. Now it's also interesting because these things are culturally translated. There is a system of support in, I think, all cultures, but the way that they're translated, because the Igbo will have omugo, and we say, oh, your mother-in-law would come and do this, and I'm northern, right? And within like northern context or Hausa especially, you're kind of like, when you have your first child, especially, you go back home to your parent, and that's where you're cared for and all of that. And in my home, we kind of, it's a mixed tribe home. So my mother-in-law was there, which is very strange. Like,
So you had double portion.
yes, like he's like, my mother-in-law was there. I had my auntie as well coming around and things. So there was supposed to be a system of support. I mean, a lot of things. Then it's then how you translate the support that you have, and all of that anyway. So yes, that's my experience. That when someone, especially in my culture, that's where we have the 40 days, right? And then you're supposed 40 days of rest. And usually in like even in the community,
I think you're running through that because, again, it's really critical. Because I think one of the things that I really want us to bring out is, in one of the episodes, I talk about the culture shock, the shock of parenting in the diaspora. And I said it starts from the very beginning, your understanding of what it means to be a mother. And I think what you're trying to tell us is that when you have a child, there are certain, if you like, structural cultural practices in the structure of our societies that ensure that the mother is supported. And you said in your culture, it's how many days?
40 days.
40 days of what? Go and tell me. What does that mean?
40 days of rest, really. And I think, yeah, translated in many cultures. Now, what is also interesting is that as enlightened as we become, right, and I find it endlessly irritating, we have like snapback culture, where it's like, oh, you just had a baby, but I'm in the market, I'm doing things, and I'm like, no, because even here, that's a struggle for us. You find that someone has had a baby, and a week later, they're cooking or doing stuff. But in the framework, you have 40 days of rest. And so from my culture, for example, you have somebody giving you a bath, somebody bathing the baby, somebody giving you massages. There's special meals that I cooked for you. There's porridge, there's soups, there's all of that. And all of that is kind of just to bring you back together. I think birth is a sacred journey.
Mm.
And so it's like you've had all of that. And so you would even find in maybe if you were out with a newborn in the streets, right? People were like, where are you going with this baby, right? Or they say you're not wearing socks, all of that, because there's an understanding that, the newborn should be cared for, the mother should be cared for. There's this tenderness, you're in this tender stage. And so all of that time, and when you see a newborn, you can tell. And it's like, why are you out here when you just had a newborn? Why, there's the culture is everywhere. There's conversation, but of course then there's personal practices as well. There's women having to go back to work after having their babies. There's all of that. But within the culture, you do have a window of 40 days that we expect, that sometimes 40, 41 days.
And that allows the mother to recuperate, allows the mother to be supported. If there was any learning you needed to have, you have older people, because really the people who support you are the older, and your parents, your old mother,
attend to you, and really all you're doing in that frame is also connecting with your baby. So that, like, you're not even bathing yourself, right? And they'll bring your baby and you will nurse your baby and things. You're just getting to know yourself as a mother, getting to know this new person that you brought into the world, and then you're supported to know, like, all your work is just be present, know your child.
And so not only your body recovers, because of course your body has to recover, but your mind as well. You are in that place where you are safe, where you're calm, and that translates to your baby. I mean, again, one of the real differences is how you're tired. I mean, you've gone through labor. It's called labor for a reason. And then you're home, and then you're cooking, and then you're cleaning. The baby's crying. You're responsible for that baby. Probably if you have other babies, you're responsible for them as well. And that has its own impact. And so culturally, what we do is really, really great, in the sense that no woman within the culture is left unsupported. But you were saying things are changing.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, there's like politics. Sometimes your mother-in-law comes or your mother comes and there's family drama, or, we live in the city and my mother. I mean, even now, migration, right? You've had your baby, but you live in England, your mother is in Nigeria, you're in Abuja, your mother is in Lagos, maybe your mother is working, because also our dynamics are changing and changing fast as well. And that also informs kind of work I do, because, it's like, and doula sounds like such a new word, but I'm like, it's a new expression for old things that we've been doing. But it's just that our ways of living are also changing.
So what does a doula do?
What does a doula do? A doula is a support person, right? And so you could be a doula in pregnancy, you could be a doula in birth, or you could be a doula in postpartum, or you could be like you could be a full spectrum, which is like you're present for all of this. So you support pregnancy, you support, and this is emotional support, this is physical support, this is resourcing. So you're not medically trained. This is not a medical support. I would be with you maybe for your medical visit. I could be with you in the hospital in your birthing room. If you choose to have a home birth, I could be one of the people that support you through that birth, right? And then especially postpartum. And I think postpartum is so important because we only think of pregnancy and birth. And then once that happens, it's like, oh yeah, she's fine, she's had the baby. But a postpartum,
and then we're surprised women have postpartum depression and the like.
And so postpartum support is so crucial, because you're back home with this baby that you're not really sure what to do. And it's like, sometimes it's like, this is only first time mom issues. It's not. It's every time mom issues. If I've had 4 children, I have 1 more pregnancy, I'm going back with 5 children. This is a new experience. I've mastered like being a parent to 4 children, but there's a new baby now. So, motherhood is newness every time you have a baby.
Absolutely. And every child is different.
Every child.
And the dynamics is different as well. And your situation may be different as well.
Absolutely.
Excellent. No, that's really, really great to know. Now, one of the things that sometimes I really want to try and understand is, as a doula, you were talking about the change in times, where oftentimes we don't always have the parents who would ordinarily have come to support us for those 40 days. Do you see the doula stepping into that space, or is this something that happens regardless?
I think that's the space that the doula, then that's the gap, that's the fracture that is happening. Because so sometimes also it's also about like education, sometimes it's like we've moved past this. I beg, we're not doing 40 days, right? And I had that arrogance. I'm not even going to lie. Like when I had my first baby, right? My auntie will come, I'm drinking cold water. She said, don't drink cold water, your body will rot. And I'm like, please, I've gone to school. They didn't say this one and all of that. And so there was fiction as well. There was help that was offered, but I couldn't understand the language. And so there was a lot of barriers for that. I think that's what's happening, where the disconnect is that we're getting more educated and losing like our own
essence of what makes us.
Yes. And so with that, even with the cold water thing, right? And now I'm now the doula that tells people, like when they say cold water, I say, yeah, avoid it. Because I do know that like you're better off with warm water. You're better off creating warmth, because warmth facilitates healing. So that's why they don't want you to drink cold water. But then they tell you get rotten and all of that. It's like, what are you saying?
Exactly. And I think sometimes, because oftentimes one of the things I also talk about is how our cultures are undermined because we're not using the right language. And people think, oh, it's like I said, underdeveloped, native. We have all these labels.
Yeah.
But there is a science behind it, not just communicated in the language that we know. So with you as an educated doula, a lawyer, you can communicate the language. You can communicate the practice exactly in a language that is acceptable and that aligns with what we understand in our modern age. So that's really interesting, and because I like food. But part of that process as well is what you're talking about is it's about knowing how we nurture ourselves back to health, and that includes the practices, but also what we eat. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, because again, a lot of young moms, especially in the diaspora, do not know this, and they also said the same. So why do I have to have the warm water and whatever? Can you just talk us a little bit around why you do some of those things? Just one or two, because I know that we don't have a lot of time, but we'll just open up our mouth.
And I like to use plants. You know how you say with plants, you need sunshine and all of this, right? And for humans, the ideal environment for healing is that you need rest, and then you need warmth as well. Warmth allows there's a certain temperature. I mean, we're warm-blooded, right? And there's a temperature that our body is always. Now, when there's a change in temperature, for example, your body works hard to kind of like bring you back to homeostasis, right? To balance it out. So what happens is when you drink cold water, for example, there's a change, there's a spike. And so your body is kind of like walking around, putting out fires, leaving the work that we've been doing. And so to make it easier, it's kind of like you drink warm water. And have you had a warm bath or a hot bath after a hectic day? Do you see how relaxing it is? I mean, that's why we have cold showers, because they pick you up, you're up and running, but you're not looking to be up and running in this time. You're looking to be relaxed. You're looking to kind of be in your body and all that. So that's why we need warm ingredients as well. So we use a lot of gingers, we use a lot of spices, kind of like to create warmth in your body. It's kind of like to start a fire. And also, if you think about it, if your sink was clogged there, you're not going to pour cold water there. You will put hot water to kind of like
unplug it,
get things moving, get your blood circulating. And blood circulating, that's the point. Your blood is moving, it's taking nutrients, it's taking healing to all of the parts that need to be healed. And so you see that the diet, for example, you have porridges. And if you think about, I'm like, there's so much intelligence in our food. When you think about common pap, right? And now we're talking kimchi, we're talking all this thing. I'm like, do you know the probiotics that is in kunu, that is in pap, that is in ogi? Because what do? You take a grain, you soak it, it ferments, you wash it, there's fermentation, and that's really good for you. And we have systems. So pap is something that is taking. We take soups as well.
And I think that, I mean, I hope I don't get, I think that also helps with the breast milk, because I remember my mother says, when I had my baby, you have to take lots of pap because it helps with production of breast milk.
There's also a sign, like, it's like for breast milk, I would say it's a demand and supply situation, right? The more you're nursing, the more breast you're going to produce, breast milk you're going to produce. But then also, are you nourished, right? So that's where the nourishing, what it does is nourishes you, because this is wholesome food. Imagine, like, okay, we're saying demand and supply, but there's nothing, your body has nowhere to pull the demand, right? And so you're like dried out, but then there's constant demand.
Yeah. But interesting. And the foods are different, because, I mean, you come from the northern part of Nigeria, I come from the southern part. And I know that one of the things that you're made when you first have a baby is pepper soup. Hot, with lots of spices, tasty,
Yeah.
but also the same kind of function
Yeah.
that kind of heats you up, warms you up, and so the same kind of fundamental principles.
Fundamentally, those are the needs. And lots of meat, lots of protein, because you're building back. You're building back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
I could talk to you all day. I could talk to you. There's so much there to unpack. So, okay. Perhaps maybe if we just move this forward a little bit. As somebody practicing in this space, how do you see the future? Because as I said, one of the things that's why I feel this podcast is important, why I'm doing it, is because I draw from my diaspora experience. I come from a background where some of the things you said is so real and so, my experience. And then I go to a different experience. And yet, like you said, things are not the same way they always were. Parents are not always, at your beck and call. They may be working and all of that. So what is your experience about some of these practices and how? Because I know that you do a lot of work around establishing those cultural practices and making sure they continue. And it's about balance, isn't it? So there are certain things that we know it's good. And the environment that we now occupy is changing. How do we create that balance so that we can carry on doing the things that are really good for us, even in a challenging environment? I don't know if I communicated that properly.
And that's why doulas exist, for example, right? And this is like a personal struggle because I'm like, every woman deserves this. Like now, for me, from a business point of view, right? And it's like this is almost a fundamental human right as far as I'm concerned. And there's a matter of conscience, like how can I be charging people for this service, right? But that's the fracture. And this is how we're translating ourselves in modern times. I like that a lot of my work is also education because these are things that already exist, but we're losing touch with the knowledge. And I'm kind of reading old scripts and translating them in modern times. And just sometimes just the fact that I exist makes a mother now think of how to plan for. It's not necessarily the doula that is in it, but it makes it a relevant conversation for families to consider when they're having children. It's no longer dismissed. It's no longer the trope of the strong woman, right? She just gave her. She's in market. She has gone to pound yam, right? And it's not about strength. It's about honoring this season as well. So, to answer your question, I hope I am answering it.
You are answering my question because, as I said, I mean, what I think about parenting in the diaspora is this rootedness. I'm being, I said when I think about diaspora, I think of a floating feather or something, and you lack roots. And when you lack roots, you kind of take on anything. Whereas when you have roots, you kind of have a source from which you draw. And so talking to you today gives me a lot of hope. It gives me a lot of hope that, yes, we have practices in our culture around motherhood, the first steps that are really important and intrinsic to the well-being of a mother, because unless the mother is whole, unless she's well looked after, she will not be able to look after the child. And where you have things like postpartum depression or anxiety or stress, that impacts on the child. I was talking to somebody, one of the series, where it affects lactation and all of that. So we have good practices, and regardless of where we are, whether we are in Nigeria, in, I don't know, Sudan, wherever it is, we can continue to practice those things that make us whole and well. Well, fine, maybe we cannot take 40 days, but maybe we can. And for some of us, even in the diaspora, we can become doulas. We can be that support where we don't have the murders available to do the omugo like the Igbos would do. The doula could do that. And we have the right kind of support that can ensure that our practices, our culture remains rooted and allows us to be fully ourselves. And I think as part of that, there may be things that other cultures can then learn from us, in the countries that we occupy, even as we learn from them. That there are things that they can learn around motherhood, around parenting, around support for mothers at the time of pregnancy and birth. So, we've shared a lot today. I'll give you the last word. What is the one thing, perhaps, from your experience that you would say every mother in our current context, educated young mothers, we know it all, don't we? What is the one message you would want to leave with them as we end this podcast?
It's interesting because this is also in my work is rooted in support, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm here get to offer support, but in my personal life, sometimes you forget that like no man is like that saying, no man is an island is so true, and you shouldn't do it alone. I like that this, and that's the conversation when we see systems and what they serve and then look for how to have those in our personal lives as well. And I think that's there's no shame in asking for help. I think that's it. There's no shame in asking for help. Like you shouldn't do it alone. Your children, even for your children's sake, they shouldn't see you doing it alone. They should know that we're all part of like a system and that's how we survive.
You shouldn't have to do it alone. We're a village. We all contribute. We build it together. So thank you so very much, Rahma, for today. Thank you for your excellent insights. And hopefully we'll have you again sometime. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening and hope to see you again in our next episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.